Nora Ellison dropped the stack of books in her arms the second someone bumped her from behind. A domino line of hardcovers toppled onto the floor with a loud thud, drawing half the bookstore's attention. "Sorry," she gasped, crouching down to gather the mess, cheeks already burning. It was Saturday afternoon. The new release of that fantasy series had just hit shelves, and the indie bookstore on Spring Street was packed to the walls. Nora had only ducked in to grab a poetry collection for her sister's birthday, not to get trapped between a wall of romance novels and a human traffic jam. She shoved the last book back onto the shelf and spun, desperate to escape the chaos only to crash right into someone's chest. Her palm hit a firm navy suit. Tall, broad, smelled ridiculously expensive. "Oh, sorry," she muttered again, stepping back. But the man didn't move. He looked just as startled as she felt. "Are you all right?" he asked, voice deep, smooth, too smooth. His eyes were locked on hers, the color of storm clouds, intense but not unkind. "I'm fine. Just trying to get out of here before I suffocate in hardcovers." "Same," he said, letting out a rare, amused breath. "But you've effectively blocked the only exit from this aisle." Nora swallowed. She felt her heart beat a little too fast. "Right? Sorry. She sidestepped, but her coat caught on the corner of a shelf. She tugged it loose, flustered. "I'm not usually this chaotic." "I don't mind," he said instantly, and something in his tone made her glance up again. The corners of his mouth twitched like he was holding back a grin. "You make this place more interesting." She blinked. "Are you flirting with me? In a poetry aisle? Would it be inappropriate?" "Yes," she said, biting back a smile, but only mildly. He laughed then, low and warm, and stepped aside so she could pass. "After you, mystery poet girl." She hesitated just for a second, then walked past him, heart still thudding. Outside, the cold air hit her like a breath of clarity. She turned the corner of the building and leaned against the brick wall, exhaling. What was that? Her life was not a rom-com. She worked at a non-profit, lived in a one-bedroom apartment with a leaky faucet, and had a cat that hated her. That man? He looked like he belonged in a boardroom or on the cover of a magazine. She shook it off. It didn't matter. She'd never see him again. But fate apparently had other plans. On Monday, Nora rushed into the elevator of the Wexler Foundation building, the same elevator she took every morning to the 12th floor where she worked in donor relations. She was running late, juggling her tote bag and a lukewarm coffee. Just as the doors were about to close, a hand shot out, stopping them. And then he stepped in. Her heart stopped. Navy suit. Same stormy eyes. Slightly tousled dark hair. Same man. She froze. He didn't. He looked at her, did a double take, and then "You," he said, eyebrows lifting. "You," she echoed, gripping her coffee like it was a weapon. "You work here?" he asked, glancing at the floor numbers. 12, she said faintly. "You." He didn't answer. The elevator dinged at 10. He walked off without another word, leaving her reeling. The moment she reached her office, she pulled up the org chart, trying to remember who worked on the 10th floor. It wasn't until lunch that she heard the whispers. "Connor Remington's back in the city," someone said near the break room. Nora's brain short-circuited. She spun around. Who? The CEO of Remington Global. The board brought him in to oversee the restructuring of the foundation this quarter. Billionaire tech guy. You've never seen him before. Billionaire? Nora sank into the nearest chair. She had flirted badly with a billionaire. In the poetry aisle. While clutching a book titled Confessions of a Broken Heart. 3 days passed. Nora avoided the 10th floor like it was radioactive. She buried herself in grant proposals and donor thank-you letters and refused to think about poetry aisle billionaires. But on Thursday afternoon, her phone rang. "Miss Ellison," a clipped voice said on the other end. "Mr. Remington would like to meet with you." His office. Now. Panic flooded her. She smoothed her sweater, wiped her hands on her skirt, and tried to control her breathing as she walked the polished marble hallway. When she stepped into his office, he was by the window, overlooking the city. He turned. "You're hard to forget, you know." She stared. "You asked to see me just to say that?" "No," he said, walking toward her. "I asked to see you because your donor reports are the only ones that don't bore me to death." Also, yes, partially to say that. She crossed her arms. Is this how you usually run meetings? No, he said. But this isn't a usual meeting. She didn't know what annoyed her more, his confidence or how much she liked it. Look, he said, more serious now. I need someone smart. Someone who understands the donors, the mission, the people side of this. I've read everything you've written. You're that person. She blinked. You want me to work directly with you? He nodded. Effective immediately. We're flying to San Francisco on Monday to meet with the board. She nearly choked. Flying. Private, he added, like that would help. It didn't. But I'll double your salary, he said, cutting her off. You'll be in every strategy meeting. You'll have autonomy. And you'll be helping save the foundation. You're the only one I trust for this. She stared at him. You don't even know me. His eyes locked on hers. Not yet. That was the moment it shifted. Something electric passed between them. Not just attraction. Not just tension. Something else. And she knew, even as her brain screamed to say no. Her mouth said, all right, I'm in. His smile could have powered the city. And just like that, Nora Ellison stepped into a world she never expected, filled with penthouse offices, private jets, and the one man she least expected to fall for. The billionaire she blocked in a bookstore aisle. The jet's leather seat was softer than anything Nora had ever sat on. She tried not to fidget as she stared out the window, San Francisco glittering below like a promise she wasn't sure she wanted to keep. Across the aisle, Connor reclined with effortless ease, reading through a thick folder as if they weren't suspended 30,000 feet in the air inside a sleek, silver aircraft that probably cost more than her building. She hadn't spoken since takeoff. Not because she didn't have questions, she had 1,000, but because she didn't trust her voice not to shake. Connor finally looked up. You're not going to explode if you speak, you know? She turned her head. I'm just trying to figure out how someone who builds software for financial analytics ends up running a nonprofit. He set the folder down. I don't build software anymore. I haven't for years. That doesn't answer the question. He leaned forward, lacing his fingers together. My grandfather started the foundation. After he passed, the board kept it running badly. I let it slide for a while, but when the quarterly reports showed half the grants were being misallocated, I stepped in. So this is guilt. No. This is legacy. Nora tilted her head. You don't seem like the sentimental type. I'm not, but I am thorough, and I take care of what's mine. She bristled. The foundation doesn't belong to you. His gaze didn't waver. It does now. The silence stretched until the hum of the engines was the only sound between them. Why me? She asked finally. You could have picked any senior manager. There are people with more experience. I don't want experience. I want instinct. You see things others miss. You understand the donors, the beneficiaries, the balance. I need someone who doesn't just talk numbers. And if I turn out to be wrong for this, I'll take the blame. She studied him. That doesn't sound like something billionaires usually say. I don't sound like most billionaires. He wasn't wrong. He hadn't touched his phone once since they boarded, hadn't barked orders to assistants or made demands. Instead, he watched, measured, listened. It was disarming. By the time they landed, her nerves had shifted from panic to guarded curiosity. The car waiting for them was sleek and black with doors that opened without a sound. Connor climbed in first and gestured for her to follow. The hotel was a towering glass monolith in the heart of the city, and the suite they entered was larger than her entire apartment. Windows stretched across one wall, offering a panoramic view of the bay. A tray of fresh fruit sat on the marble counter, untouched. I booked separate rooms, he said, noticing her hesitation. You'll be 2 floors down. This is just where we'll meet before the board dinner. Dinner, she repeated. What am I supposed to wear to that? He pulled a sleek box from the sideboard and handed it to her. This. She opened it slowly. Inside was a black dress, simple but flawless, with a pair of heels that looked like they'd been sculpted from shadows. She stared. I can't accept this. I didn't ask you to. Connor, you're representing the foundation. You need to look the part. That dress was designed by someone who owes me a favor. You wearing it settles the debt. She narrowed her eyes. You always use people like chess pieces? He didn't flinch. Only when I want to win. Later, she stood in front of the mirror in her hotel suite, adjusting the thin strap over her shoulder. The dress fit perfectly, of course it did, and for the first time in months, she saw something in her reflection she didn't recognize. Confidence. Power. A hint of danger. When she stepped into the elevator, her phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a message from the Foundation's internal system: board dinner, private dining room, 7 p.m. She arrived 10 minutes early. The room was dimly lit, the table long and gleaming. Crystal glasses sparkled under the warm light. She took a seat at the far end, unsure where she was supposed to be. Connor walked in moments later, followed by a dozen board members in tailored suits and elegant dresses. They greeted him with a mix of respect and wariness. He took the head of the table. "Nora," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Up here." Every head turned as she stood and walked to the opposite end. Sitting beside him, someone raised an eyebrow. Another whispered something behind a hand. Connor ignored them. "This is Nora Ellison. She'll be leading our restructuring strategy for donor engagement." A man with silver hair frowned. "She's not senior staff." "No," Connor agreed. "She's better." Nora felt the heat rise to her face, but she kept her expression neutral. The dinner passed in a blur of courses and questions. She answered everyone with clarity, refusing to be intimidated. Connor didn't speak unless necessary, letting her take the lead. When the final glass was cleared and the board members began to file out, the woman seated across from her paused. "You did well," she said. "Not many people hold their own in that room." "Thank you." The woman glanced at Connor, who hadn't moved. "Watch him. He's not as untouchable as he looks." Then she left. Nora turned to him. What did she mean by that? He stood slowly. "It means she's known me too long." They walked out together, the city lights casting long shadows across the marble floor. In the elevator, she faced him. "You could have done all of that without me." "I didn't want to." "Why?" He looked at her, and in that moment, something cracked beneath the surface of his carefully controlled exterior. "Because when you're in the room," he said quietly, "I remember I'm human." The elevator doors opened. He stepped out first. Back in her room, Nora stared at the dress folded neatly on the armchair. She was in too deep. And the worst part? She didn't want out. The wind cut sharp through the Manhattan skyline as Nora stepped out of the rideshare in front of Remington Tower, the tallest building on Park Avenue. Her heels clicked across the granite entryway, but her thoughts were louder. The board had approved Connor's restructuring plan 2 days ago. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt like she'd been shoved into the deep end of a life she didn't recognize. Inside the lobby, a sea of polished marble and steel stretched out beneath a chandelier that looked like it belonged in a museum. Nora had only been here once before for a staff meeting on the lower floors, but now the elevator took her all the way to the penthouse, past levels she hadn't known existed. When the doors opened, she stepped into a space so vast it seemed to defy every law of New York real estate. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the entire room, revealing a sweeping panorama of the city. The air faintly smelled of cedar and something darker, more elusive. Connor stood near the windows, sleeves rolled, a glass of something amber in his hand. "You came," he said, not turning around. "You sent a car," she replied, stepping forward cautiously. "I wasn't sure you'd get in." "I almost didn't." He turned then, and for the first time he looked tired. Not the kind of exhaustion that came from lack of sleep, but the kind that settled deep, like a wound that never quite healed. "I needed to see you," he said simply. She placed her purse on a side table, avoiding the way his gaze lingered. "I assume this isn't about donor portfolios." "No," he said, setting the glass down. "It's about what comes next. I thought we already had a plan. You restructure, the board signs off, the foundation survives. We go back to our lives. That's the part I'm struggling with." She crossed her arms. Why? Because I don't want to go back to what my life was before you walked into that bookstore. The words hung heavy between them. Nora exhaled, slow and wary. Connor, we barely know each other. I know you hate pretense. I know you read poetry when you're anxious. I know you ask questions no one else dares to. And I know that when you walk into a room, people listen even when they pretend not to. She hesitated. That's not love. No, he admitted. But it's the beginning of something I haven't felt in a long time. Nora's pulse quickened, her instincts pulling her in two directions. You live in a world where everything is calculated. I'm not a variable you can control. I don't want to control you, he said, stepping closer. I want to understand you. She looked away. People don't like when they lose control, Connor. Especially men like you. He gave a short laugh, not amused but aware. That's true. Which is probably why you're the first person in years who's ever made me feel completely off balance. Silence filled the space again, but this time it felt charged, electric. She walked toward the window, placing a hand on the cool glass. This isn't real life. Private jets, penthouses, boardrooms. It's a dream you can wake up from whenever you want. I can't. Connor stepped beside her, not touching, just close enough to feel. Then let me show you the parts one don't wake up from. She turned to him, uncertain. What do you mean? He reached into his coat pocket and took out a folded envelope. My father left the foundation to my grandfather when he walked away from the company. Most people think he vanished because of a scandal. That's not true. She took the envelope slowly. Inside was a photograph of an older man standing in front of a modest community center, children laughing around him. On the back, scrawled in faded ink, legacy isn't built in boardrooms. It's built in hearts. My father gave up everything for that place, Connor said. My mother never forgave him. I was 15 when he left. For a long time, I thought he abandoned us. Then I found his journals. He wasn't running from the company. He was running toward something better. Nora looked up. And now you're trying to finish what he started. He nodded. But I can't do it alone. And I don't want to. Her throat tightened. Connor. He took her hand gently, as if afraid she might pull away. I know I've built a fortress around myself. But you. You walked in without asking for permission. And now I don't want to lock the door again. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then she pulled her hand back carefully. You don't fall in love in a week. I didn't plan to fall at all. She backed away, needing space. You're asking me to believe a fantasy. I can't. Not yet. He didn't argue. Then let me earn it. She looked at him, something soft flickering behind the wall she'd built around her heart. How? He walked to the console table by the piano and picked up a key card. Come with me tomorrow. There's something I want to show you. What is it? A place where I don't need to be a billionaire. Just someone trying to make something right. When she didn't respond, he placed the key card on the table beside her purse. If you show up at 9, I'll know you're ready to find out. She gave a small nod, then turned and walked out of the penthouse, the card burning in her memory before her fingers ever touched it. Back in her apartment, she sat on her bed, the city lights flickering beyond the window. She hadn't planned on any of this. Not the bookstore. Not Connor. Not the way he made her feel like she was the only person in the room even when the world watched him. She reached into her coat pocket. The key card was still there. She stared at it for a long time. Then she set it on her nightstand. And for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel like running. The sun lifted slowly through the Manhattan skyline as Nora stood on the curb, the wind tugging at her coat. She clutched the key card in her pocket, the edge digging into her palm like a quiet dare. A black town car eased up beside her, and the driver stepped out without a word, opening the door. She slid inside, her pulse steady but alert. The drive took them out of the city, past the familiar hum of traffic and into quieter streets edged with trees just beginning to bloom. After nearly an hour, the car turned down a long gravel road flanked by stone walls and low iron gates. A weathered wooden sign stood at the entrance. It read, The Hollow. Beyond it was a property unlike anything she expected. Not a mansion. Not a private island. A sprawling, two-story brick building with wide porches and open fields behind it. Children ran across the grass, laughter echoing through the crisp morning air. Volunteers bustled near the side entrance, unloading a van full of supplies. Connor stood beside the front steps, sleeves rolled again, holding a clipboard and speaking to a woman who looked like she hadn't slept in 2 days but still smiled like the world could be fixed. Nora stepped out of the car, blinking against the brightness. Connor looked up. His eyes didn't search the horizon. They went directly to her. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. "I wasn't either," she replied, taking in the scene. "What is this place?" "It's what my father built after he left the company. A place for kids who aged out of foster care but weren't ready for the world yet. Transitional housing, mentorship, job training. He called it the Hollow because he said the world liked to forget what fell through the cracks." She followed him up the steps and through the main entry. The inside smelled like fresh bread and old books. There were mismatched couches, paintings clearly done by children, and a wall of Polaroids labeled "First Jobs." Connor led her down a hallway, past a music room, a tiny library, and a workbench where someone was fixing a bicycle. "I took over funding it after he passed," he said. "But I've never shown it to anyone outside the foundation. Not even the board." "Why me?" she asked. He paused near a sunlit window. "Because you asked me once what was real. This is. No penthouses. No boardrooms. Just what matters." She stepped closer, her voice softer. "And what does that mean for us?" He turned, and this time, there was no armor, no careful detachment. "I'm not asking for a maybe anymore. I want a life where I don't have to compartmentalize what I feel for you. Where I don't have to pretend this isn't the most important part of my day." She held his gaze. "You're used to getting what you want." "Not always," he said. "But I've never wanted anything like I want this." The words landed with weight, not theatrics. There was no audience but the quiet hum of life moving around them. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked to the nearby bookshelf and pulled out one of the journals stacked haphazardly. It was filled with entries written in neat, looping cursive. Notes about mentoring kids, worries about funding, sketches of floor plans for a second building. "You really did try to walk in his footsteps," she said. "I tried to understand what made him choose this over billions." "And do you?" He stepped to her side. "Now I do." Outside, a teenager waved from the porch, calling Connor's name. He excused himself with a glance, letting her linger. She walked through the room slowly, meeting a few of the residents, some shy, some eager to talk. There was no press, no donors, no plaques with names carved in gold. Just people helping people. Later, she found him near the greenhouse, inspecting a damaged gutter. "I think I understand now," she said, brushing dirt off her sleeve. "Why you never told anyone about this." He glanced up. "It's not for show." "I know. That's why it works." They stood in the quiet for a moment, the wind rustling through the early spring leaves. "I'm not afraid of this anymore," she said. "You. What this might become. I just needed to know it wasn't all a mirage." He reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. It never was. That night, back in the city, Connor didn't take her to a rooftop restaurant or a yacht party. Instead, he walked her to the corner of her street where the bodega owner waved and her neighbor's dog barked from the window upstairs. "I know this isn't a grand gesture," he said. She smiled. "It is. You're meeting me where I live." He stepped closer. "I love you, Nora." I didn't know how to say it before without sounding like I was trying to buy your affection. But this isn't about wealth. It's about waking up and needing you beside me. About hearing your voice in every decision I make. Her breath caught. "I love you too." He kissed her there, beneath the glow of the street lamp, not as a billionaire and not as a man trying to fix a legacy, but as someone who had finally found the one person he couldn't live without. 3 months later, the Hollow opened its second building, named after a woman who'd once walked into a poetry aisle and changed everything. And in the front row of the ribbon-cutting ceremony, holding Connor's hand, stood the only person who'd ever seen every version of him and loved each one just the same. It was the kind of morning that hinted at summer clear skies, warm breeze, and the sound of the city waking up with intention. Nora stood in front of the mirror, fastening a delicate clasp at the back of her neck. The necklace had arrived that morning in a slim velvet box accompanied by a handwritten note in Connor's unmistakable handwriting. No grand declarations this time, just 5 words: for the life we're building. She pressed her fingers against the pendant for a moment, then stepped out of her apartment. A car was waiting, but not the usual sleek black town car. This one was vintage, a deep forest green convertible with the top down and Connor behind the wheel. "You drive?" she asked, surprised. "I do a lot of things people assume I outsource," he said, opening the passenger door for her. "Besides, I figured if I'm going to sweep you off your feet today, I might as well do it myself." She slid into the seat, laughing softly. "That sounds dangerous." "Only mildly." The ride took them north, following the river until the buildings thinned and the landscape opened into soft hills brushed with wildflowers. He didn't say where they were going, and she didn't ask. She liked the way the wind tangled her hair and how, for once, the world didn't demand anything from her. The road ended at an iron gate that opened automatically as they approached. Beyond it, a long gravel drive stretched toward a house that looked like it had been lifted from a dream: stone walls, ivy-covered arches, and a wraparound porch with wicker chairs already catching the morning light. She turned to him. "What is this place?" He parked beside the fountain and looked at her without any of the usual restraint. "It's ours." She blinked. "What?" "I bought it last month." It was a mess: roof leaking, foundation cracked, overgrown gardens, but I saw it and thought, this is where I want to wake up with her. She stepped out of the car slowly, her shoes crunching against the stones. "You kept this from me. I wanted to finish the work first. Make it ready. For us." He led her across the porch and through the front door. The inside was bathed in light from high windows and skylights. The scent of fresh paint and lavender hung in the air. Hardwood floors gleamed underfoot, and tucked in the corner of the living room was something that made her stop cold: a small upright piano, scarred and worn but lovingly restored. "That's yours," he said gently. "I found the one you mentioned once. Same make, same model. I had it shipped from a collector in Vermont." She turned to him, eyes glassy. "Why would you do that?" "Because when you told me you hadn't played in years, it didn't sound like a choice. It sounded like something you were still mourning." She stepped toward the piano, fingertips brushing the keys. "It looks exactly like my mother's." "I know," he said. "I called your sister." She turned slowly. "You did what?" "She told me where to find it, and how much you'd downplay how much it meant." Nora let out a breath that caught halfway between disbelief and something more fragile. "You weren't supposed to remember that story." "I remembered everything." They walked through the house room by room, sun-drenched kitchen, cozy study with built-in shelves already filled with books, a garden out back with rows of new soil ready for planting. She stopped at the bedroom, where the windows framed the trees like a painting. "This is too much," she whispered. "It's not enough," he said. "But it's a start." She turned to face him, her voice trembling. "You've given me more than anyone ever has." Connor stepped closer. "You gave me something first. You didn't see me as a billionaire or a fixer or a legacy. You saw the cracks." "I loved the cracks," she said. "They made you real." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her heart stopped. "Connor, no pressure," he said, opening it to reveal a ring with a single sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. "But I've rewritten enough contracts to know when something's worth investing in for life." She stared at the ring, then back up at him. "You're asking me to marry you in a house I didn't know existed 20 minutes ago. I'm asking you to build a life here, with me, as equal partners, as people who've already survived everything else." The silence stretched, but it wasn't empty. It was full of every fight they'd fought, every inch of trust hard-won, every moment of honesty that had brought them here. She reached for his hand. "Yes." His breath hitched. "Yes. Yes," she said, laughing now, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Of course yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit as if it had always belonged there. They stayed in the house until dusk, making coffee with the half-stocked kitchen and dancing barefoot in the living room to music playing from his phone. When the stars came out, they stood on the porch wrapped in a quilt he'd found in one of the guest rooms. "I never thought I'd want this," she murmured. "I didn't think I deserved it," he said. "Until you." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "What do we do now?" "We live," he said. "We build. We make mistakes. And we wake up in that bed tomorrow and every morning after, knowing we chose each other." She turned to face him. "I still can't believe this is real." He kissed her gently. "It's real. And it's ours." A year later, the garden behind the house bloomed in full. The hollow expanded to 3 more locations, each named after small things with big meaning: the porch, the library, the greenhouse. Nora played piano again, sometimes late into the night, her music drifting through the windows while Connor worked beside her, drafting new plans and writing emails he never sent. They were married in the field behind the house beneath a canopy of lights, with only close friends, foundation staff, and a few kids from the hollow who had insisted on making decorations. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was. But it was real. And for them, that was everything.